When my husband left for Poland, the apartment felt as if someone had taken the warm air out of the rooms. It was November when he boarded the plane, cold glass and honest light, and he promised he would write, send photographs, call when time allowed. He had left to study a program that could change everything for him, and, in the quiet way people mean well, he kept saying, "This is for us." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The first months were easy in a small, soft way. I learned to make coffee in the morning for one. I learned the route to the market without consulting him. I read a lot. The days filled with errands, with distant video calls, with me watching his face on a small rectangle of a screen. But after 7 months, a slow thing began to happen. Loneliness grew not as a sharp pain but as a blankness that asked to be filled. That was how I met Bolton in Ghana. He was not a man I would have noticed in the old life. His name might have passed like a leaf. He was the director of the National Financial Investigation Agency in Equatoria del Mar, and in our circles his face and his power carried weight. He had a quiet way of moving through rooms as if he owned a private com. He had an even calmer voice. People listened. That drew me to him in a way I did not expect. We met at a charity meeting. I had gone because someone from the neighborhood club insisted I come, and because I needed to be distracted. Bolton was there to speak about corruption and accountability, about the long, thoughtful work of keeping a country's money honest. He spoke with careful phrases, and when his speech ended, several people crowded him. I wanted to stay on the outside of that crowd, but when he took a step that put him directly in front of me, our eyes met and the world narrowed for a second into two polite smiles. At first our talks were public and safe. He asked my thoughts about the charity program. I listened to his stories of a job with too many late nights. He was generous with his attention but not showy. He asked about my husband and listened when I said he was in Poland studying. He said the right things: empathy, interest, small jokes to make me laugh. The next time we met was at a small dinner arranged by mutual acquaintances. When I left that night, the city was quiet and I felt a warmth that surprised me. Once you have known someone's warmth, it is a small and dangerous thing to keep from thinking about it. I told myself I was lonely, that my husband had been away so long, that the distance pulled threads between us taut until they rubbed. I told myself the meetings with Bolton were harmless and that adults could be friends. But friendships lead easily into longer conversations. He texted me to ask about my day. I sent him photos of a painting I was working on. He sent visits that felt considered and slow, like a patient hand on the small raw places of the day. It did not happen in a single dramatic moment. It crept in, with small betrayals dressed as kindness. He began to say things that sounded like promises, not promises about leaving his work or mine, but private words that made me feel seen. "I'll be here for you," he said once, and his voice was not about my husband, it was about me alone in the room. I learned the ease of sharing a coffee at dawn, of finding that someone else knew how you liked to stir sugar into a cup. I learned to like that mirroring. My husband called often enough, then sometimes with such bright enthusiasm about a lecture or a professor that my guilt was pushed aside. I pictured him on a bench in Krakow, wrapped in a scarf, speaking ideas into the cold. His calls were full of plans, of future promises of a life we would return to together. And because I loved him and wanted him to succeed, I never told him about the soft spill of attention I was receiving in our hometown. Over weeks, our meetings with Bolton took on an order that felt inevitable. We talked at the agency, in the quiet offices after meetings, sometimes at a cafe that had low light and a jazz record playing softly. He told me stories of cases that were long and exhausting. I told him things I had never said aloud. He listened like someone who collected confessions, not to punish but to hold them carefully. Once, after a late meeting, he wrapped a wool scarf around my shoulders as if the night had been intended for simple tenderness. I let him. I told myself again that it was loneliness, not betrayal or words that soften guilt. We knew each other's secrets in the way people come to know small rooms of someone else's house. I learned that he was divorced once, many years ago, and that he kept a photograph of his old dog on his desk. He told me about his father, who had been a teacher, and about how careful he was with paperwork because one mistake could destroy a life. He smiled at me when he spoke about justice, a man who believed in the rightness of rules but who bent, for me, those rules of restraint. With time the meetings became physical in a way that felt inevitable to both of us, not shocking but tender. I am not going to describe explicit details. What matters is the way my skin knew him, the way his hand fit the small of my back, the way our breath sounded when the city was asleep. Those moments were colored with a complicated guilt and a strange gratitude. I felt wanted in a way that took me by surprise. I felt alive and ashamed at the same time. There were practicalities that I kept to myself, little lies about where I had been, excuses about long afternoons at the library, a message about a meeting that was actually with him. These lies did not feel monstrous to me at first, they felt like small, necessary evasions. I would return to the apartment and make my husband's favorite dinner, and then I would call him to hear his voice on the phone and speak of ordinary domestic plans as if nothing had happened. His voice was a faithful comfort, then sometimes when he spoke of the future I felt a bitter double vision. I loved both of them in different ways, and that fact freed me the weeks past. There were moments of dizzy relief when I imagined how I might tell my husband someday, maybe in a way that would make sense, maybe in a way that would make us understand the emptiness that had crept in. But mostly I kept my secret folded inward like an old letter. I told myself I would stop. I told myself many things that I did not do. One evening, Bolton invited me to an official ceremony at the agency. He needed to speak with a group about an important new initiative. He wanted me there because he said the initiative related to the charity where I volunteered. In the crowd I sat and felt my heart pound. The room was full of people who knew him and looked at him the way subjects look at a king. He walked to the podium with deliberate steps, and when he saw me he gave me a small nod that said both hello and something like ownership. I felt a thrill that made me feel ashamed. After the ceremony, he took me aside and we walked in the garden behind the agency. Autumn leaves made a soft rustle under our feet. He told me he had been transferred to a new project, a long-term investigation that might take him away for months. He said it like a man giving me a gift wrapped in thick paper and then asking me to hold on to it. I felt panic rise in my chest because transfers mean distance, and distance had been the thing that made me seek him in the first place. We did not speak of leaving. We spoke of light things and small plans. He kissed me like the world had permission to be kind to us for a moment, and then he left to travel for work. When he went away I waited with the awful hope that he would come back and that nothing would change. When he returned, we picked up as if the pause had been a comma rather than a period. I told myself that loving him did not make me less loving towards my husband, it only rearranged my capacity. I believed it, and I did not believe it. Living with a secret is a kind of slow-burning stove. The flame is always there, warming the house, and you begin to make your life around the heat. I found ways to manage the heat. I made sure the bills were paid, I attended community meetings, I told the children who lived in the apartment above to water my plants when I would be away. I ran errands for my husband's parents and smiled at neighbors. All the while, I had a life that slipped on the side, with Bolton calling me in the middle of the day with small notes, with late-night messages that were sometimes nothing more than a photograph of the moon he had seen. I never saw myself as cruel. In my mind, I was a vessel in two directions, holding sorrow for my husband's absence and joy for a rare attention I found in an unexpected place. I told myself that I was being honest with my needs, even if I was not honest with my actions. That rationalization kept me afloat, even though it did not stop the ache in my chest. There were moments of terror. Once my husband called about a detail of our apartment. The heater had broken and I had to answer him in a calm voice while my heart hammered because Bolton was at the door waiting for me. I remember standing with the phone pressed to my ear and the ache of a double life pressing on my shoulders like a winter coat too tight. I speak of things like this so you know how small, ordinary facts can become traps. There were also moments of small kindness that felt like pure light. Bolton one time took me to a place on the coast that overlooked the ocean. We walked on sand that smelled of salt and old shells. We sat on a low rock and he spoke softly about the work he did and how heavy it could be, about how sometimes he could not tell his colleagues what he felt because feeling made a person vulnerable. He told me he liked my laugh and he told me that he wanted to look after me. He said, "If you ever need someone to be here, I will be." Those words lodged in me like seeds. My husband's letters and calls continued. He sent photos from snowy streets and told me of a professor who had complimented him, of a book he had read, of a friend he had made. He wrote about how proud he was of the work and how excited he was to come home. I would read his messages and imagine him in a cafe with a book open, smiling at the world. How could I tell him what was happening? How could I expose the private fissures I had made inside the life we had built? It felt like an impossible honesty. Months begin to gather like collected shells on a shelf. One by one they accumulate and form a pattern that you do not always notice until you step back. We lived through one season after another, humid summers, then rains, then the bright dryness of spring. In private, I started to think about what would happen if the truth came out. I thought about how two different people I loved would respond. I thought about the face of my husband when he learned that I had told my secrets to someone else. I thought about Bolton's face if he realized the damage being done. I avoided talking about these things because doing so would require action, and action meant change. I learned that secrets have a weight. They change the way you move, the way you answer a doorbell, the way you hold a cup so that your hands do not tremble. Sometimes I would wake in the night and think of my husband asleep in a dorm far away and of Bolton in his office with a lamp on. I would replay our conversations and feel a cold shame because I could see how the pattern of my choices had formed. Despite the shame, there were moments when I believed I was learning about myself. I believed I had been asleep to needs I did not know I held. When I think back now and I reflect as someone who made those choices, I can see clearly the ways my life was imperfect and full of longing. I was not a good person nor a wholly bad one, I was complicated and human. I sought tenderness and I found it, and then I learned the cost of how I found it. Bolton and I became an unlikely comfort to each other. He, in his way of power and public duty, found small private breaks from his heavy days in our meetings. I found the warmth I had been missing while my husband studied. We became careful about the time we met. We came to understand each other's boundaries, though boundaries when crossed once are never quite the same. There were days when I feared the future and days when I was careless. There were small, secret joys like choosing a sweater in a shop and sending a picture, receiving a thumbs up and a heart emoji. There were also sharp, bright moments of guilt, sharp because they cut through any excuse I had made for myself. I had the life I had chosen and the life I had been given before my husband left. They coexisted, not peacefully, but side by side. No one discovered our secret in the months that followed. No one knocked at the door with a photograph in hand. My husband called and sent small videos of him walking past old architecture in Poland, and I would look at his face and feel the complicated knot in my chest. I would tell him that I loved him and that I missed him and that everything was fine. I said these things and I meant some of them. I meant the love, certainly, though love had been complicated now by choices beyond him. At times, I made plans that sounded like honesty in my head. I told myself that I would tell him when he returned, that we could walk through pain because we had built a life before and we could rebuild. I told myself that one day I would speak truth. But the day never came because I kept choosing the easier path, the kindness that asked for less work, the heat of someone who waited for me in the evenings. Life went on, full of days that tasted like ordinary garlic and sunlight. My husband wrote about finishing a paper. He sent a message about a course he had led. The weather was changing again. The sky over Malabo had started turning grey in the early evenings, and the rain came down like a warning. Every drop on my window made me think too much. My husband had been gone for more than a year now. We still talked, we still sent each other little messages, but something had changed inside me. It wasn't just loneliness anymore. It was something deeper, something I couldn't describe, not even to myself. Balthasar had started to sense it too. He was a man who watched people carefully. He noticed things before they were even spoken. One night, we were sitting in his private office. The lights were low, then there was soft music playing from the speakers, classical music, the kind that filled the silence but didn't interrupt thoughts. We had just finished talking about a new case he was working on. Then he turned to me slowly, with that quiet voice of his, and asked, "Do you still think about your husband?" His question hit me like cold water. I didn't answer right away. I looked down at the cup in my hands. The coffee had gone cold. I whispered, "Of course I think about him. He's still my husband." Balthasar nodded slowly. He stood up and walked over to the window. The night outside was dark, but the streetlights below gave a soft orange glow. He stood there quietly, his hands behind his back like he was thinking deeply. Then he turned back to me and said something I wasn't ready to hear. "What if he marries someone else in Europe?" I blinked. What? Balthasar came closer, sat down across from me, and looked me straight in the eyes. His voice didn't rise. It stayed calm, almost too calm. "You think you're waiting for him," he said, "but he's in another world now. Another life. Do you know what people do when they are far away for a long time?" I didn't answer. They change. They forget. They fall into new habits. New people. New temptations. What makes you so sure he hasn't already moved on? I shook my head quickly. No. He loves me. He always tells me he does. He would never. Balthasar leaned forward. His eyes were sharper now. "Words are cheap," he said, "especially when someone is far away. You think you're still his wife, but maybe he's already looking at someone else. Maybe some Polish girl is cooking for him, laughing at his jokes, sharing his bed." I felt something hot rise in my chest, anger, sadness, confusion. I stood up and turned away from him. "Why are you saying this?" He stayed seated. "Because I don't want to lie to you." He paused, then added, "I want you to stop living in two worlds. You're here. He's there. I'm the one here with you. I'm the one who sees you, touches you, listens to you when you cry. And yet, you still give part of your heart to a man who's no longer present." I sat down again slowly, feeling my strength fall. The room was too quiet now. I could hear the soft ticking of his clock on the wall. "But he's my husband, Balthasar," I whispered. He sighed. "A husband who left you here. A husband who may never return. A husband who may have already found someone else." There was a long silence. My mind was racing. I thought about the pictures my husband had sent. The messages. His voice on the phone. He always sounded so proud, so focused, but yes, maybe, just maybe, he had become distant. Maybe his calls were shorter now. Maybe the "I love yous" felt routine. Maybe I was the only one still believing in the life we had before he left. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice small. Balthasar stood up again. He walked over to me, placed his hand gently under my chin, then tilted my face up to look at him. "I want you to choose your reality," he said. "You can keep waiting for a man who might never return. Or you can stay here with me and build something real." I stared into his eyes. There was no anger there. No jealousy. Only calm confidence. "I can take care of you," he said. "You know that. You've felt it. You've seen how I treat you. When have I ever lied to you? When have I ever made you feel alone? He was right. Since the beginning, Balthasar had always been present. Even when he was busy with work, he would find time to check on me, to bring me small things, a book I had wanted to read, a scarf for the rainy season, even a pack of my favorite cookies from the market. He remembered things my husband had forgotten. "You're not his responsibility anymore," Balthasar said. "You're mine now. And I take that seriously." A tear slid down my cheek. "I didn't know if it was because of guilt or relief he could come back," I said quietly. "He could still be the man I married." Balthasar shook his head slowly. "Even if he does, he won't be the same. And neither will you. You've changed. You've grown. You've seen what it means to be loved here, not just from a distance." He held my face gently in his hands now. "Let him go," he said again. "Let Poland keep him. Let that life fade. I'm here. I'm the one who's real." His words hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to believe him. Part of me already did. Another part of me, the loyal part, still clung to the idea of the woman I used to be, a faithful wife waiting at home. But maybe that woman was already gone. The next morning, I didn't call my husband. I didn't open my messages or check for his voice notes. I went to the market with Balthasar instead. He bought fresh bread and fruit. He carried my bag without asking. We walked like two people who belonged together. When someone from the neighborhood waved at us, he smiled and waved back. At the cafe, he sat beside me instead of across. His hand rested lightly on my knee under the table. It was the kind of gesture that said, "This is us now." I didn't move it away. He ordered for both of us. He knew what I liked. He always knew. "This is your life now," he said as we sipped tea. "Not a half life. A full one. If you let yourself live it." I nodded slowly. Something inside me had begun to shift. I still hadn't told my husband anything. I didn't know if I ever would. But for now, I followed Balthasar's lead. I let him take my hand in public. I stopped hiding. There were still quiet moments when guilt would raise, a soft voice in my mind that whispered, "You are still someone's wife." But then Balthasar would look at me, with his calm strength, and say something like, "You're not alone anymore," and the voice would disappear. We started spending more time together, not just in secret places, but in open ones. He introduced me to his close friends. He brought me to a small event with officials. People began to know my name. I began to feel like I was part of his world, not just a visitor, and slowly, my husband became a memory instead of a promise. Balthasar gave me a different life, one that was not born out of planning but of emotion. He challenged me to choose, not based on loyalty to the past, but by honesty about the present. I still keep my wedding ring in a box, not because I'm still waiting, but because I want to remember who I was before this part of my life began. I don't know if my husband in Europe has moved on, or if he will one day come back with questions in his eyes, but I do know that Balthasar is here, with his quiet voice, his steady presence, and his belief that love should not be built on waiting, but on presence. "Let him go," Balthasar had said, and now, with each passing day, I am starting to believe that I did. It was on a Sunday. The rain had stopped just before sunrise, and the air felt clean and still, as if the world was waiting for something to happen. I had made tea. I had put on a soft blue dress, one Balthasar said made my eyes look clearer than a morning wave. He was coming over that afternoon. He said he had something special to tell me. I didn't ask questions. I only made the house feel warm, candles lit, music low, windows slightly open to let in the sweet smell of wet earth. When he arrived, he looked different, not tired, not serious, but happy. His smile was bigger than usual. He brought a bottle of wine and a small cake from a bakery. We sat on the couch, close. We spoke softly, like the house could hear us and keep our secrets, and then he leaned in and kissed me. It was slow, sweet, a kiss that didn't feel rushed. A kiss full of unspoken feelings. What I didn't know was that just outside the door, a taxi had pulled up and my husband, the man I had been lying to for months, was walking toward the house with a small suitcase and a big smile. My husband had come home without telling me. He wanted to surprise me, maybe to make me laugh, maybe to see my face light up with joy. He had bought a ring, a new one, to replace the old one that I kept in a box. He had dreams in his pocket, pictures to show me, stories to tell. He had waited for this moment. He did not knock, he used the spare key. He opened the door and he saw me, not alone, not waiting, not crying with joy, but kissing Balthasar in Gonga on our living room couch. The door closed harder than it opened. I jumped. Balthasar stood up quickly. My heart felt like it had been struck by lightning. I turned and saw my husband, standing by the door, eyes wide, mouth half open, hand still holding the key. He didn't shout. He didn't say my name. He just stood there. Still. Quiet like a statue made of heartbreak. What could I say? Wait, I said, stepping forward. I didn't know you were coming. He looked at me like I was someone else. Not his wife. Not the woman he had traveled the world for. But a stranger. I reached out to him. He stepped back. His voice finally came, cold and flat. How long? I looked at Balthasar, who had now moved to stand behind me like a shadow. How long, Miriam? My husband asked again. His voice cracked. I couldn't lie. Not anymore. Months, I said. I never planned it. He laughed, a short, sad sound. Planned or not, it happened. He looked at Balthasar now, for the first time. The man who had taken what wasn't his. You're the big man from the agency, he said. I've heard your name before. Important. Respected. Powerful. You're also a liar. Balthasar said nothing. His eyes were steady, his face calm. Get out, my husband said. I looked at him. Please, can we talk? Later, he said. Right now, I can't look at either of you. Balthasar stepped forward, as if to speak, but my husband raised a hand. I don't want anything from you. You already took enough. And then he walked out. Left the house. Left me standing there with my heart now fully broken, and Balthasar still standing in my home. After my husband left, I sat down on the floor. Not the couch. Not a chair. The floor. I cried until I couldn't feel my hands. Balthasar sat down too, but not close. He didn't touch me. He didn't speak. After a long silence, I whispered, you said he'd never come back. Balthasar finally spoke, calm as always. I was wrong. I looked up at him. What else are you wrong about? He didn't answer. But something in his face changed. A small crack in his calm mask. A pause in his perfect silence. The next day, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't stop thinking about everything. So I did what I had never done before. I searched Balthasar's name online. Not for work. Not for politics. But for his personal life. And then I saw it. Mary in Gonga, wife of national financial leader, hosts women's health event. Wife. He had a wife. Her name was Mary in Gonga. She was beautiful, elegant, educated. And she stood beside Balthasar in every photo, smiling like she had no reason to worry. My blood turned cold. I felt dizzy. I scrolled more. They had been married for 10 years. I called him. He didn't pick up. I called again. Again. Nothing. Finally, he answered. You didn't tell me you were married. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, it's complicated. No, I said, it's not. You lied. You looked me in the eyes and told me you loved me. That I was yours. That I should forget my husband. All while sleeping next to your wife. He sighed. I could hear his coldness returning. His calm mask. We have an understanding, he said. Mary and I live separate lives. You live many lives, I spat. Then something worse happened. I got a message from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Avalina. She sent one sentence, "He told me the same things he told you," I replied. We spoke. Then another woman reached out, Sophie, then another, Elsa. He had been with many women, always private. Always gentle. They say life doesn't break you all at once, it breaks you in slow, quiet ways. A missed call, a door that doesn't open, a silence that stretches longer each day. That's how I lost my husband, slowly, fully, until one day, there was nothing left but the echo of his name in an empty. It had been 3 weeks since the day he found me kissing Balthasar. I had written him letters. I had sent voice notes. I waited for replies that never came. Then one morning, a taxi stopped in front of the house again. For a second, I thought it was him. My heart jumped. I ran to the door. But it wasn't a surprise visit this time, it was a delivery man. He handed me a small brown box and walked away. I brought it inside, placed it on the table, and stared at it for a long time. Then I opened it. Inside was the wedding ring I had given him and a short handwritten note, "I loved you more than you knew. But I deserve better than what you gave me." That was it. No, a goodbye. No, I forgive you. No, let's talk. And it came so quietly, I didn't even hear my world fall apart, but I felt it. Every single day. For a while after that, I thought maybe Balthasar would come back. I told myself, he said he cared. He said he'd always protect me. He said I meant something, but weeks passed. Then months, no calls. No messages, nothing. I called him once, just once, on a day when I couldn't stop crying. The call didn't even ring. "This number is no longer available." I emailed. No reply. I visited the agency office one day, pretending I needed something. The receptionist looked at me with polite confusion and said, "Mr. Balthasar is no longer here. He's moved to another region." Just like that, he vanished. It's strange how life moves on around you while yours is stuck. I would walk through the market, and people would laugh and bargain like the world was fine. I would pass couples holding hands, and I'd wonder if they would break each other too. One day, I would lie in bed at night and stare at the ceiling, wondering if either man ever thought of me. My phone stayed silent. My house felt cold and my heart felt like it had been hollowed out and filled with shame. Soon, the whispers began. Neighbors started looking at me differently.